When I felt the brittle edge of the paper tucked between the pages of her Bible, it was as if a 50-year-old silence had chosen that exact moment to break. My dearest Samuel, if you are reading this, it means I have left you, and a truth I could never speak must now be told. Before you, my love, there was a boy, a son, my son, and I gave him away. 9 words. 9 words that took the comfortable, well-worn memories of my 52-year marriage and turned them inside out, revealing a story I never knew existed. Good afternoon, my dears. My name is Samuel Blackwood. I'm 84 years old, and today I'm going to share with you the final chapter of a love story I thought had already ended. But before I do, if this is your first time stopping by my little corner of the internet, please take a moment to subscribe and perhaps leave a comment to let me know where you're listening from. It helps an old storyteller feel connected to the world and gives me the encouragement to continue sharing these tales from my heart. It was the spring of 2024, a full year since my Eleanor had passed. The house, once filled with her quiet hum and the scent of baking bread, was now just a house, a vessel of echoes and dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun. I had finally found the strength to sort through her most personal belongings, a task I had been avoiding as one avoids a final goodbye. Her closet, her sewing room, the small desk where she wrote her letters. It was there, in the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of old photographs, that I found her childhood Bible. It was a small, white leather-bound book, its pages a delicate, yellowed lace. I had never seen her read it, but it was always there, a quiet sentinel from her past. As I ran my thumb over the gilded edges, a single folded sheet of paper, as thin as a moth's wing, slipped out and drifted to the floor. My first thought was that it was a pressed flower, a bookmark, but as I bent my old knees to retrieve it, I saw her familiar, elegant script, and the world I knew, the life I had shared with my Eleanor, began to dissolve. I sank into her chair, the worn chintz cool against my skin, and the blood rushed in my ears as I read on, each word a gentle hammer blow against the foundations of my memory. The letter was dated just a few years into our marriage, a confession she had written but could never bring herself to deliver. It told a story of a different Eleanor, a girl of 17, alone and terrified in a world far less forgiving than our own. It spoke of a brief, youthful romance with a boy who went off to war and never returned, of a family that had valued reputation over compassion, and of a choice that was no choice at all. They sent me away to a home for unwed mothers in the city, she wrote. I held him for 2 days. He had your quiet way about him. Even then, I named him Daniel, and then he was gone. I clutched the letter, the paper so fragile I feared it would turn to dust in my hand. The quiet grief I had lived with for a year was suddenly consumed by a tidal wave of shock, a profound and aching confusion that left me breathless. Who was this woman? This stranger who had slept beside me for 5 decades, who had raised our daughter, who had held my hand through every trial and triumph. A chasm opened in my own heart, an echo of the pain she must have carried in silence for all those years. All the moments I had misinterpreted, the fleeting sadness in her eyes when she saw a mother with a newborn, her fierce, almost desperate love for our daughter, Lily, her quiet insistence on sponsoring a child in a faraway country. They weren't quirks. They were the ghosts of a memory she was living with every single day. The letter ended with a plea. Do not judge the girl I was, Samuel, and love the woman I became, for I became her only for you. I folded the letter, my movements slow and deliberate, and placed it on the desk. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room, and in the quiet twilight, I began to weep, not for the secret she had kept, but for the unimaginable strength it must have taken to carry it alone, to build such a beautiful, loving life on a foundation of such profound sorrow. The next morning, the world felt strange, out of focus. Every corner of the house seemed to hold a question. My journey into Eleanor's past began not with a search for a lost son, but with a search for her. I needed to find the girl in the letter to understand the woman I had married, the woman who had protected me from her own pain. The letter mentioned a friend, Clara, the only one who knew, the one who had stood by her. Clara was the godmother to our Lily, a dear friend I hadn't spoken to in years since she'd moved out west after her husband passed. Finding her number in Eleanor's old, worn address book felt like finding a compass in a storm. Making that call was one of the hardest things I've ever done, my finger hovering over the numbers on the phone. When Clara answered, her voice was as warm as I remembered, but it turned cautious, hushed, when I told her why I was calling. I read her a part of the letter, and a long, heavy silence stretched across the line, a silence that held decades of a shared secret. "Oh, Samuel," she finally whispered, her voice thick with an emotion that mirrored my own. She carried that with her every single day. She was so afraid you would see her as broken, as someone less than the woman you deserved. Clara, in her gentle way, filled in the painful details the letter had only sketched. She told me of the shame, the isolation, and the impossible pressure from Eleanor's parents, who had orchestrated the whole thing to avoid a scandal in our small, judgmental town. Eleanor, my strong, unshakable Eleanor, had been a heartbroken child forced to make an adult decision, utterly alone except for Clara. Clara had been the one to drive her to the adoption agency, the one who held her as she cried for weeks afterward, the one who helped her piece her life back together enough to eventually meet me, a clumsy young man who knew nothing of the battles she had already fought. "She made me promise never to tell," Clara said, her voice cracking. "But she also made me promise that if anything ever happened to her, and if you ever found out, I would give you this." A few days later, a small, padded envelope arrived. Inside was a single photograph, its edges soft with time. It showed a young Eleanor, her face pale and her eyes holding a universe of sorrow, cradling a tiny, sleeping baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. It was the only picture she had, and tucked behind it was a small, faded birth announcement from a local paper. Daniel, born May 12, 1968, at St. Jude's Home for Children. Looking at that photograph, at the girl who would become my wife, I felt no trace of betrayal. All I felt was a profound, protective love for the young soul who had endured so much. I finally understood the true depth of her strength. Her life had not begun with me. It had been rebuilt with me, piece by painful piece. Our love story wasn't a fairy tale. It was a testament to her resilience. The existence of this lost son, this Daniel, was no longer a secret that could hurt me. It was a sacred trust she had unknowingly passed on, a final piece of her heart left in my care. What was I to do? The question haunted my waking hours and my dreams. The letter had not asked me to find him. It was a confession, not a request. He would be a man in his mid-50s now, with a life, a family, a story of his own. To appear out of nowhere, an old man claiming to be the husband of a mother he never knew, could cause unimaginable pain, reopening wounds for everyone involved. I could not make this decision alone. I called my daughter, Lily. She came over that afternoon, her face etched with concern at the strange urgency in my voice. I sat her down at the kitchen table, the same table where Eleanor had helped her with her homework, and I laid the letter and the photograph between us. I told her everything, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. She listened in stunned silence, her eyes, so like her mother's, filling with tears as she read the letter. She picked up the photograph, her fingers tracing the image of the baby, her brother. "All those years," she breathed, a look of profound sorrow and understanding on her face. "She carried this all by herself." Lily, always practical and compassionate just like her mother, saw the dilemma immediately. "We can't just storm into his life, Dad," she said, her voice soft. "It wouldn't be fair. But he deserves to know. He deserves to know she loved him, that she never forgot him." Her words settled something in my own heart, clarifying the turmoil. This wasn't about me or what I wanted. It was about honoring Eleanor's unending love for a child she never got to know. It was about letting him know he was not a shameful secret, but a cherished, heartbreaking memory. And so, our search began, not with a roar, but with a whisper. We didn't hire investigators or make a public spectacle. We started with the few crumbs Eleanor had left us, the birth announcement and the name of the home for unwed mothers. St. Jude's, we soon discovered, had been closed for decades, its imposing brick facade now a block of luxury condominiums. Its records, we were told after a dozen frustrating phone calls, were held by the state archives. sealed away in a fortress of privacy and bureaucracy. Adoption records from that era were a locked box, designed to protect, but in our case, they felt like a cruel, final wall between a mother's love and her son. We sent letters, we filled out forms, we pleaded with faceless clerks over the phone, but the answer was always the same. The records were sealed. Only the adoptee could petition to open them. We had hit a wall, a dead end that felt as final as a gravestone. The weeks turned into months, and a sense of hopelessness began to creep in. The initial shock had faded, replaced by a dull ache, a constant awareness of this new, empty space in our family's story. With every passing day, the secret felt heavier, not because it was shameful, but because it was a message we couldn't deliver. During this time, I found myself walking through the house, seeing everything in a new light. I began to understand things I had only ever witnessed. I saw Eleanor's quiet moments of reflection by the window not as weariness, but as longing. I saw her fierce, sometimes overprotective love for Lily not as anxiety, but as a desperate need to hold on to the child she was allowed to keep. Her life, which had always seemed so serene and straightforward to me, was revealed to have been a masterpiece of quiet courage. She had built a beautiful garden of a life for us, all while tending to the silent, secret wound in her own heart. The frustration of our fruitless search began to feel like a betrayal of that courage. We had her story, her final wish, and we were failing her. It was Lily who found the path forward. Late one night, after hours of scouring legal websites and support forums, she found it. A state-run confidential intermediary service, a little-known program designed to connect birth parents and adoptees, but only if both parties had independently registered their consent to be found. It was a sliver of hope in the darkness. He would have had to register himself, to have been looking for a past he might not have even known about. The odds were infinitesimal, but they were not zero. We filled out the paperwork, a strange and sterile collection of forms for such a deeply emotional quest. We provided a copy of Eleanor's letter, the precious photograph, and we composed a letter of our own, trying to distill a lifetime of love and regret into a few carefully chosen paragraphs. We made it clear we wanted nothing, that we sought only to pass on the story of a mother's unending love and to let him know he was never forgotten. We sent the package off, a message in a bottle cast into an ocean of bureaucracy and time. Then we waited. The waiting was a unique kind of agony, a quiet, persistent hum of hope and fear in the background of our daily lives. Months turned into a year. The seasons changed. I tended to Eleanor's garden. I read her favorite books. I tried to make my peace with the fact that this was a door that was meant to remain closed. I had done what I could. I had tried to deliver her message, and perhaps that was all I was meant to do. I had almost given up hope, resigning myself to the beautiful, painful mystery of it all. Then, one Tuesday morning, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I answered, expecting a telemarketer, but it was a woman from the intermediary service. My heart, which I thought had grown quiet with age, began to pound against my ribs. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice gentle but professional. "We have a match. Daniel registered with us 5 years ago. He's been waiting." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. He had been looking. He had been wondering. Suddenly, this was no longer a story about the past. It was about the present, about a future none of us could have imagined. The intermediary explained the process. Daniel had been contacted. He had been given our letter and his mother's. He was, she said, shocked, overwhelmed, but he wanted to connect. He didn't want a phone call, not at first. The shock was too great. He suggested an email. Later that day, an email arrived with a simple subject line, "Hello, that first message is something I have printed and kept in the very Bible where this all began." He wrote of a good life, of loving adoptive parents who had passed away years ago. He wrote of a wife and 2 grown children of his own. But he also wrote of a persistent, quiet sense of absence, a question mark at the very center of his identity that he had carried his entire life. "Your letter," he wrote, "and the letter from my birth mother. It was like finding the missing piece of my own soul. I never allowed myself to hope for a story like this. I just wanted to know a name, to know that I wasn't a shameful secret." To find out she had a good life, and that she was loved, is a gift I can never repay. He sent a photo. I clicked on the attachment, and my breath caught in my chest. It was Eleanor's face I saw. Her eyes, her smile, the gentle set of her jaw, all mirrored in the face of this man who was a stranger and yet, instantly, family. I saw the son she had held for 2 days, the boy she had never, ever stopped loving. Over the next few weeks, we exchanged emails, then tentative phone calls that grew longer and easier with each conversation. I learned about his life as a history teacher, about his passion for fishing, about his daughter who was an artist, about his son who was studying to be a doctor. I told him about Eleanor, about her quiet strength, her love for her garden, her terrible singing voice that she saved only for the car, her unwavering kindness. We were 2 men, an ocean of time and secrets between us, building a fragile bridge, word by word, memory by memory. Finally, during one of our calls, he asked if we could meet. "I need to see where she lived," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I need to meet my sister. And I need to meet you." Lily and I prepared for his arrival with a mixture of excitement and profound trepidation. We were about to welcome a ghost into our home, a living, breathing piece of Eleanor's hidden heart, and we had no idea how it would feel. The day he arrived, I stood on the front porch, the same porch where Eleanor and I had sat on 1,000 summer evenings, and my heart was pounding like a young boy's. A car pulled into the driveway and a man got out. He was tall, with kind eyes, Eleanor's eyes. We stood there for a long moment, 2 strangers bound by the love of a woman he had never known and I had known my whole life. He walked towards me, his hand outstretched, a hesitant smile on his face. But I didn't take it. I did the only thing that felt right. I pulled him into a hug, the way a father would embrace a son he had been waiting a lifetime to meet. "Welcome home," I whispered, and I knew in that moment that Eleanor was there with us, her spirit finally completely at peace. The circle was complete. The past and the present had finally, beautifully, converged. That weekend, our house, which had been so quiet, was filled with a new kind of sound, the sound of discovery. Daniel walked through each room as if it were a sacred museum, touching the back of Eleanor's armchair, looking at the photos on the mantelpiece, tears welling in his eyes. Lily and Daniel sat at the kitchen table for hours, 2 siblings separated by secrets, now sharing their life stories, finding uncanny similarities in their gestures, their laughter. I watched them, and I saw Eleanor in both of them, her legacy of quiet strength and deep compassion living on. We took him to her favorite places, the small park by the river, the library where she volunteered, the little church she attended. And finally, we took him to the cemetery. The 3 of us stood before her headstone, a simple granite marker that read, "Eleanor Blackwood, beloved wife and mother." Daniel knelt and placed a single white rose on the grass. "Thank you," he whispered, to her, to me, to the universe. "For everything." He never called me Dad, and I never asked him to. I was not his father, but I became his friend, his link to the mother he never knew. I am the keeper of her stories, the one who can tell him how she took her coffee, the sound of her laugh, the way she hummed when she was tending her roses. It is a sacred, joyful duty. Today, as I sit here in my quiet study, the house doesn't feel so empty anymore. It is filled with new memories layered over the old. Daniel and his family visit often. My grandchildren and his have become cousins, friends, their lives intertwined in a way none of us could have ever imagined. Our family didn't break when the secret was revealed. It grew. It became something richer, more complex, and more beautiful than I ever knew. I look at the photo of Eleanor on my desk, the one from our wedding day, her smile so full of hope, and I smile back. The letter didn't rewrite our love story. It just added the first heartbreaking chapter, the one that made all the other chapters possible. It taught me that a heart can hold more love and more sorrow than we can ever imagine, and that the greatest act of love is not to live a life without secrets, but to have the courage to understand the secrets of those we hold dear. My journey through Eleanor's past led me to a future I never could have predicted, a future blessed with more family and more love. That note in her Bible was not an ending. It was a beginning. It was her last and most precious gift to me. Thank you for letting me share my story with you today, my dears. If it has touched you in some way, please leave a like and share it with someone who might need to hear a message of hope and understanding. Tell me in the comments, has a discovery from the past ever changed your present? I love to read your tales. A warm hug from this old father who learned that a life and a love is always more than it seems. Until next time,